I found out a little bit more about the meaning of Genesis 6 that I haven't seen elsewhere, and I think I need to talk about. There's the verse where it says that men began to multiply on the face of the earth. This is a direct echo of Genesis 1, where the people created are told to go out and be fruitful and multiply. And then when the daughters are born to them and the sons of God see that they're good looking, this is a direct echo again of the creation in Genesis 1, where man, male and female, is made in the image of the Elohim. So these are more or less instances of a group of gods falling in love with their own creation, wanting to go out and mate with their own creation. And this is something that not everybody can do. And I think this is the nature of the corruption that's alluded to, and the reason why everybody gets wiped out, in that not everybody can live this way. Not everyone can have immortality that's had at somebody else's expense, because you need a certain number of prey to support the predators. If everybody says, oh, I'm going to go out and marry the predator, become one myself, live off everybody else's life force, well, eventually that society is going to collapse because there's not enough people left to feed on anymore. This seems to be alluded to me in the Genesis 2 account, where you have the people who are created to be the vegetable food for the gods turning around and saying, oh, I'm going to be like the gods, I'm going to do the eating instead. That doesn't change the fundamental relationship of the fruit, like to the eater. Like in the Norse gods, they had these magical apples that would keep them from aging. And presumably that's what people are put there for. They're then to be food for the gods to keep them from aging. But not everybody can eat that way. It's a fundamentally corrupt way of sustaining immortality, and that seems to be, I would see, the short form, the direct way of saying what's wrong with the world before the flood. There is a mention of, after this initial passage, that Yahweh says you're all going to die. You've got 120 years. Even either your lifespan as an individual, this eventually comes true with Moses, because he can't get into the promised land past the age of 120. Or as a society, you've got 120 years till the flood hits. But either way, you've got this warning. You've got this period of time. If you don't change in the meantime, you're all going to be wiped out. This comes in between talking about how the sons of God marry the daughters of men. At this point, they've only married. They haven't quite completed the means of corruptly pursuing immortality. They haven't completed the transaction at this point. So first you get them seeing that these women are beautiful, daughters of men, and wanting to marry them. And then you get the warning. It says, if you do this, you're all going to die. Now, there were what is translated as Nephilim. The translation that I've got here in a sort of Strong's Concordance type thing is fellers, bullies, tyrants. Now, this is not something you have to be an extraterrestrial to be. You don't have to have any special origin. You don't have to be the offspring of a god and a human to be a tyrant. You can just be made as a tyrant. You just be part of your culture, or just because you want power, or whatever. And there's very little mention of this term, and I think it's on purpose. Now, if you go outside the Bible to get all these interpretations of what Nephilim are, you're falling into the deceitful trap that the Nephilim are meant to have set. In that you bring in all these outside sources and outside meanings, and you miss the real message of the passages, and that the Nephilim are not that significant. Their origins aren't significant. There's only one other place that I found what they're mentioned in the Bible. This is later on when there are wars against giants. And the people of Moses are about to go into Canaan when he's at the end of his life, the 120 years that's alluded to in Genesis 6 as well. And they send out scouts. The scouts come back and give this report and say, the sons of this certain lineage are there. And then when it doesn't look like that's enough to scare everybody, they start upping the ante. They tell a more and more outrageous story. They say these people are so big that we are like grasshoppers to them. Grasshoppers are only really about this tall. So if you multiply that out, 72 inches for a regular person versus an inch for a grasshopper, let's say, that's 72 to 1, and multiply that out on the person's height, and then, you got like 500 feet tall. So this is not possible that these people could really be this big. It's a lie. It's a false report. So when people are called Nephilim, in this second instance in the Bible, it's a lie. Those people aren't really Nephilim in terms of their physical dimensions. They could be tyrants, yes, but they aren't Nephilim in sense of being supernatural in any other way that from all the other giants are. There's no difference. And it's very ironic in that size doesn't matter a whole lot. They say they were like grasshoppers to them. Well, being big doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you're trying to defend your crop and a plague of grasshoppers comes in. Your size doesn't help you a whole lot. Grasshoppers are still fairly quick. With nothing but your hands and your feet, you can't kill very many grasshoppers. They're just going to eat your crop, and then you got nothing to live on. As a giant, you've either got to leave, import your food from somewhere else, or starve to death. You can't fight them. So being big in that instance is actually a disadvantage. And it's not something that will defend you against a horde of grasshoppers, which invade and occupy and take over your food supply, which is very rich in the land of milk and honey. So this is a distraction. It's a lie. In the biggest two instances of the use of the word Nephilim in the Bible, it's a deception, a distraction from what's really going on. And that's, it seems to me, how so much of this dialogue on Nephilim works today when you see all these videos. Now, there is another meaning that could be given to sons of God, in that Adam is mentioned as a son of God in the lineage that leads to Jesus. So the first generation people who were created by the Elohim and not given birth to by other humans are called sons of God. If there are several mating pairs created to create the population, which I think is possible because they're created male and female, and it doesn't say how many, there could be more than one pair, then there would have been men and women created in parallel with Adam, and the men could be called sons of God. So this means that there could be another meaning of the sons of God marrying the daughters of men, and that the first generation of people created saw more generations of people being born, and like powerful, rich men who got there first and have an advantage over the men. Even today, they might say, hey, I think I'll trade in my original wife for a younger model. I think I want to like one of these daughters a couple generations down better than the wife I got. And that way, they would be essentially imitating the sons of God, in that they would take somebody who is, in a manner of speaking, their creation, or their co-creation, and falling in love and wanting to marry that person. That would be imitating their gods. Now, that would not bring a sort of immortality about. It would be a futile gesture. It would not work the same way it doesn't work today, ultimately. But if they were imitating their gods, the thing is, it didn't work for their gods either. The people the women that they married all got wiped out in the flood. So one mirrors the other. One is the image of the other. When we move on past the Nephilim, and when you talk about how they were there when the sons of God, first they were there when they married. The Nephilim were already there. Okay, this is critical. They were already there when the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were good looking and wanted to marry them. They weren't created by that union. Then we get the warning, say this is 120 years, up to 120 years delay, probably not that long. Then we get the consummation of the marriages and the children. And it says the Nephilim were there for both phases. There could be a considerable delay involved because these people live up to centuries. So you could theoretically have a 120-year delay between when you see someone think, well, that woman's attractive, I want to marry her, make her immortal, and when the marriage is consummated and when the children are born. So there could be a delay of several years because these people live very long and the gods aren't aging at all. And that, it seems to me, is why there's this mention of the Nephilim being on earth when the initial attraction occurs between the sons of God and the daughters of men, and when they're married, and then when the children are born. But there's a very special meaning of men of renown in that this comes from the word Hashem. And of course there are two Shems if you listen to my other video. They are the stewards and the preservers of the creation. And there's one for the Genesis 1 creation and one for the Genesis 2 creation, each getting onto an ark, and they're both named Shem. So when you get to the end talking about who the men of renown were, there are multiple possible meanings. And they cannot be just the tyrants, just the sons of God who are acting like men, because they're trying to breed with the daughters of men, or the tyrants, or they can also be the legitimate descendants, or illegitimate descendants, one from a pure line who mingled with gods and one from a line who didn't. So the men of renown applies in many different ways, because all the men there are practically men of renown in that they live a lot longer than today's. And some of them appear to be not aging at all because they're the offspring of gods. There's a tendency to try and split these meanings apart when really they could apply in many different ways and to virtually everybody involved. And that helps, I think, in terms of seeing what the whole set of passages means. Their wickedness and why they're evil all the time, I think I already mentioned. That is because their means of seeking immortality is inherently corrupt. You can support one god, maybe, or a handful of people who are living that way, but when everybody tries to do it, it's not universalizable. Society will collapse if you try to live that way, and a vast number of people are all going to die off.